My throat hurts. Oh my God. I've gathered you here today to talk about the apparition and resume our investigation of the Dark Castle films, which I mostly love, but as we go deeper and deeper into the Dark Castle catalog, um, oh man, it's getting pretty fucking bad, bro. It's getting pretty bad. The Apparition is a bad, terrible movie. Is it the worst Dark Castle film that we've covered? No. No, Whiteout, 2009 still has that dishonor. The Apparition is pretty bad though. Very bad. It's a ghost story, hungry for the paranormal activity money, made in 2012 by Dark Castle, starring Ashley Greene and Sebastian Stan. Those two names are also the only two things that I can say anything positive about. Really just hitting all of my buy triggers simultaneously. I loved watching Ashley Greene and Sebastian Stan. They're ridiculously pretty people. Much like Whiteout, the best thing about the apparition is the Ashley Greene shower scene. So Kate Beckinsale's was better. Don't you fucking don't you ever forget that that's one of the best shower scenes ever. Wow, we're already derailed. It's already terrible. The Apparition is just a really bad movie. It feels, well, it doesn't feel unfinished. It just feels entirely pointless, completely pointless. It's incredibly bad. There is one good sequence in it, which is why I think it's better than Whiteout. There's one good sequence where Sebastian Stan has an out of body paralysis moment where he's sleeping on the floor and Ashley Greene is sleeping in the bed. They're a couple, and they are a pretty charismatic couple. They have really decent chemistry, and at least you don't want to see anything bad happen to these two young and pretty people. So horror job well done. I don't want to see bad things happen to them. It's more difficult than it sounds. Trust me, I've covered a lot of horror movies where you don't care about the main characters. Here, at least I do, so that's a benefit for sure. But the scene, he has an out of body experience where he sees his body on the ceiling directly like above him, and he has paralysis in both forms, astral and physical. But while that's going on, the sheet that Ashley Greene is lying beneath on the bed by herself is tightening around her, form fitting to a point where it begins to suffocate her. That's a very fascinating kind of sheet strangulation, suffocation. It's very interesting because it's partly erotic because you get the outline of her body, which is awesome, which is incredible to look at, but you're seeing it in this morbid way. And as she's writhing in the death throes, it starts to become less erotic and more Freudian as Sebastian Stan's character is able to break free of the paralysis or whatever. I don't fucking know. Don't try following the logic in this movie. It's a fool's errand. But he goes up to the sheet and he like tears it apart, and you can't help but think of coming out of a womb, being reborn, right? But these are strong symbolic moments that the film doesn't follow through on. But there is a symbolic language being used. It's not being used well, but it is here, and no one has gone into it. It's really easy to dunk on the apparition. It's really easy to just constantly make fun of it and humiliate it because it is a bad movie. I don't think it's worth humiliating. It's just bad. It's just a bad movie. But no one seems to even try or attempt to engage with the film on a symbolic level, and it's a deliberate symbolism that the film is using as well. This film mostly takes place in this couple's house, which in it, which is in this like housing development, this housing area that is unfinished just yet. It's a new housing area, and they have like one neighbor, like three doors down. The rest it's empty, and if that doesn't just scream um, commentary on the urban sprawl, commentary on fear of the sameness of white communities, then I don't really know what could. It doesn't drive its point home as much as it should, but there is a very interesting part of the film. The film ends at a Costco, and the film's inciting moment is at a Costco. Honestly, that's when she buys a cactus, and that cactus is the first thing that falls victim to this sinister force that has invaded Sebastian Stan's body, and now they're home. It's something that you brought from schooling, from an experiment with you, and that can also speak to the poisoning of the young American drive to procreate and marry, and the impossibilities associated with it, and like its downfall in the 2010s. But at the Costco, it's really cool because that's where they buy a tent. They buy some likeness. They buy an analog. They buy a facsimile of a more rural and possibly pure life. They buy a tent, and the film ends within that tent that was on display inside of the Costco. And that's another, I think, pretty good scene. It comes way too late. It's at the very end of the movie, and all of these hands start groping and reaching over like Ashley Greene's mouth, her entire body consuming her as she is within this tent, within this Costco. That could have been enormously powerful had the film been even slightly more articulate than it was. I think it's saying an awful lot right there. It's playing with the concept that the ultra-modern world is not only dehumanizing but alienating. But beyond that, and I think what strikes its target audience so much, which this being a PG-13 film after Paranormal Activity's money, it's teenagers. So what is this film trying to say to teenagers? It's trying to say that the ultra-modern world has no place for romance. In fact, it is anti-romantic. And that everything that you see is a reproduction of something that may have once been truthful, but that truth has been lost to time itself. And the truthfulness of romantic youth culture is now just a specter, an apparition, a haunt. It's just something that doesn't exist anymore, that insists upon itself, that insists in haunting you. Every relationship that you are ever in, you are comparing it to some sort of cinematic, some sort of literary, poetic, sort of idealized form of it. But everything that you get, every romance, every kiss, every house, every feeling, even every horrific thing that could happen to you is simply a reproduction of something of an original. Um, it's lesser than. Everything's derivative within the apparitions America. And I think that that's interesting. The problem with this kind of language is that this film, if I can continue using the analogy or for film language, this film stutters a lot. Stutters more than I do. It stutters constantly. It mumbles. Sometimes it's incoherent, and then sometimes it is just screaming at the top of its lungs. This film does not understand tone, but more than that, it doesn't understand its own grammar. What's sort of heartbreaking about it is that it does know how to establish the items and elements, the different components of its horrific film language, but then it doesn't know how to properly use all of those things in conjunction. It doesn't know how to form a sentence. It knows, it knows this film just doesn't know how to form a sentence. It's it's sadly a film that has all of the components, all of the symbols, all of the like hieroglyphics that would make for a perfect and very interesting, if not perfect, screen language, but it doesn't know how to use any of its symbols together. But Ashley Greene is a fucking fox. Sebastian Stan is smoking. Um, Damn, that's it though. Dark Castle, why you gotta do me like this late in the game? I do love Dark Castle. As a reminder, Dark Castle made some masterful horror films: House on Haunted Hill, Gothica, Orphan, Ghost Ship, just to name a few. They made some masterful horror films, and then some very interesting horror films like The Hills Run Red, some very fun horror movies like 13 Ghosts, and some truly terrifying films like House of Wax. The Apparition, ooh, better left forgotten. But I would like to see this kind of Costco language being utilized elsewhere in a different kind of context, possibly. Because the idea of Ashley Greene, like the physical poetry of Ashley Greene inside of this static reproduction of like a passionless tent inside of a unimpressive gigantic box store in true despair being taken away from the screen, cut to black, she's being taken off into the void. And there's something really cool about that that is worth further investigation. Thank you for watching. I have a sore throat, and this rant, sorry to tell you, didn't make things any better. Alright, dudes, I gotta go die.